Hello, this is Dread from Epic Builds, and in today's video topic, we will go over Abyssal Echoes dot stacking Devouring Orb Speed Monolith Farmer Void Knight, a return to form and a showcase of an actually good Devouring Orb build. If you want the crit version of this build, where you run Devouring Orb for all your damage, I would heavily suggest PerryThePig's version, as he ran it all the way to 400 plus corruption in hardcore. If you want to play the sexy Abyssal Echo version, keep watching. Links in the description. If you've been enjoying the steady flow of last Epoch content of late, I'd suggest leaving a like on the video, as that's the best way to support the channel. So for Devouring Orb, I've seen a lot of different setups, and most of them sadly underperforming, except for, of course, parries that I've seen. I've had a few viewers reference a specific guide, but it had a few red flags that I don't really like. Not only was it in base 100 corruption, which for reference for you PoE folk, that's like a white tier map, while like 300 corruption is like a red tier map in comparison. And it didn't even really look good for 100 corruption, especially with how good of gear the character had on. I think Crit Devouring Orb can be good, like I said with Perry's version, but I think Abyssal Echo VK can be better now, especially after the nerfs of Devouring Orb, and that's what we look at in this video. Abyssal Echoes is a skill that applies an ailment called Abyssal Decay, which is a long-lasting ailment that is tagged void, spell, and damage over time. Normally it does very low amounts of damage per second, but it has a function built into it where if you hit the enemy after applying a stack of Abyssal Decay, it will make all of the damage deal at once, which is necessary to make it deal damage due to the fact that you can't put more than one stack on an enemy. This kind of skill obviously requires something fast hitting to keep up the most amount of DPS, so our eyes move towards, of course, Devouring Orb. Not only do the small orbs orbiting you hit the same target, but they also shoot out Abyssal Orbs, which will create a Void Rift on enemies. This combination allows you to place an Abyssal Echo under the enemy, and then Devouring Orb hits the enemy, and it deals all of its damage at once, one-shotting trash and ignoring many defenses on tougher targets. Abyssal Echoes has a lot going for it that normal crit stuff doesn't really have. It ignores critical strike avoidance, which is one of the biggest problems later on when corruption pushing. Sometimes you need to take it to push through monoliths quicker, and this build not only ignores it, but it thrives on it. It's more or less a free modifier. It also ignores dodge chance completely, as you only need Devouring Orb to hit once to trigger the dot. And Abyssal Echoes doesn't even hit, it just applies the dot and it doesn't need to hit to apply it, which means we pretty much ignore dodge completely as well. Both of these factors make it insanely strong for pushing corruption, as in the higher corruptions you will have to deal with crit avoid all the time and dodge all the time as well. Another benefit of running Abyssal Echoes is how Leech functions with dots. When you hit an enemy with a crit and leech back that life, it stops at 100% of your HP. It doesn't matter if you're leeching 20 life or 20,000 life, if you reach 100% of your HP pool, it will stop your leech. This means that leech is a little less efficient than for dots. Since dots hit per second and have a duration, and reapply its leech per second because each individual tick is an individual tick of damage in terms of leech, it acts a lot like Slayer Leech from Path of Exile, which means even at full life, it still functions. Obviously, if you hit an enemy and it pops the dot, your leech will go instantly, but Abyssal Echoes applies its dot to so many things, so many times per second, you're always leeching something, which means we're overall tankier than your stereotypical Void Knight, even with the lower amount of HP you see in the video, which is caused due to the fact that my gear is kind of trash. And speaking about gear, my gear is really bad. You could very easily double my HP with some efficiencies, or if you actually have one, you could just run a Ravenous Void instead, and that will solve all of your tankiness problems. But mainly, you could make much better gear than what I'm currently wearing. There will be a build planner in the description where it's the finished build planner of the stuff that I suggest running instead of the stuff I'm actually running because, of course, gear, because nobody really has perfect gear, am I right? And that's that's another thing I want to talk about. I showcase gears in bad gear on purpose. People may not realize this, but I do this because if a character with bad gear can do 300 corruption, right? Which this one does, that means a good character like this one with good gear can push much farther and carry you much farther, meaning that your stereotypical player can push more than your average like 200, 300 corruption up into 400 and actually get some really good drops. But yeah, that's been a long enough intro. Let's get into the video, shall we? All right, here we are in game with the build here. So one thing I'd like to note, the old Abyssal Echoes looked absolutely terrible, but the new one, oh my god, they did such a good job at making this thing look so sexy, man. Like, that was like my favorite thing about playing this build was the fact the Abyssal Echoes look so good. Like, if this is like a good representation of what they'll be working on in the future, who we're in for treats. But yeah, so for skill rotation, so for normal monolith gameplay, what you're going to do is set up your reversal trick with reversal and all that, then set up your devouring orb and your anomaly. Pretty much the anomaly is going to reduce the cooldown of your devouring orb, meaning you get max devouring orb stacks. And then when you see a pack, you have a lot of cast speed, so simply just right click on it and they will probably instantly die, thanks to the fact that we have the Devouring Orbs, which will hit and apply the Abyssal Echoes and stuff, and the Abyssal Echoes last a few seconds, and it also spreads, so more or less, you only need to Abyssal Echo like once per pack, which is for fluid gameplay. Obviously, it's not as like auto-bombery as people would like, but it's very fluid, especially when you get a bunch of cast speed. It's really not that big of a deal. Yeah, that's pretty much it for monolith gameplay. Now for like bossing, what I would suggest is setting up your reversal trick, obviously, and then get some devouring orbs set up, get the anomaly set up, and then just simply hold down the right click button and let your devouring orb do work. As you can tell there, that was like a 260k tick. It gets a little bit higher later on when you actually have some like void res shred stacks and all that, and more devouring orbs going off. That's like per time hit, by the way. That 260k, that is per time hit. So for instance, a devouring orb hits like 5 times, that's like 260k times 5, because as long as the Abyssal Echo is reapplying, which as you can tell, if you have a lot of stacks, it is constantly reapplying. So as long as Abyssal Echoes, as long as a Devouring Orb is constantly reapplying, like hitting it, it's completely fine. So it's like, as long as you're hitting enough, you will do wonders with that. So that's pretty much it for the skill rotation. Now for skills themselves. Devouring Orb itself. I do have an Omnis on. I'm literally wearing it just for the res. As you can tell, my gear is absolute garbage tier. Like, look at this ring. Like, who runs this ring, right? Except for me, right? I literally just went in my stash and like just picked up random gear pieces. You could very easily make this so much better. It's funny. Like, look at this. It has like tier 2 necrotic res. Like, I literally threw it on because it has mana regen on it. Like, seriously, like it's not that hard to upgrade this gear. That's what I love about this game, is like, if you just simply do the right stuff, you don't have to have the best gear ever, as you can tell. But yeah, but for Devouring Orb here, you don't need a +1, although I would suggest a +2 Devouring Orb on your helm, which I'll explain why in a second. So we take 1 point into Dark Moon. This was the node that was nerfed. They removed the 300% mana cost from Devouring Orb and then slap this on it instead, where you have negative 50% duration. So you literally get half the amount of orbs that you used to, which for the crit build sucks absolute ass. But for our build, doesn't really matter because we only need to hit so many times with Abyssal Echoes, right? So we've pretty much completely dodged this nerf. We take 1 point into Abyssal Rush. This is another nerf. This went from 20% movement speed to 6%. This hit every single build ever that's ever used Devouring Orb, so it's like whatever. Then 1 point into Cosmic Impact. We do want this. This makes it so the orb that goes around you hits as well, and it means that when we're moving through the monolith, all we gotta do is have these orbs go up, and then press Abyssal Echo, run through the pack, and then they'll immediately blow up. Not because Devouring Orb's damage, but because of Abyssal Echo's damage, it will just pop and kill everything, which is really, really cool. So, like, Devouring Orb literally does no damage in her build, like, whatsoever. It is 100% Abyssal Echoes doing all the heavy work, right? Obviously, it might kill trash because, it does damage, but, like, still, in comparison, Abyssal Echoes is doing all the damage. And then 5 points in the Sightless Star, we want as much cast speed as humanly possible and the mana efficiency, because when you're moving through monoliths, you don't want to spend forever casting, which is the main focus of this build, is to have as much cast speed as possible. And then we take 1 point travel into Void Adept, 1 point into Hollow Orb, which gives us increased duration. We don't care about the scaling damage or the area on Devouring Orbs. We just want the duration. Then, of course, the stereotypical setup with Abyssal Emission and the Dark Torrent. This node was nerfed as well. This hurts the Devouring Orb crit build, but not our build because, like I said, we only need to hit so many times. Then 2 points travel into Rift Collar. This Void pen doesn't matter for us. Then 3 points into World Rot. Instead of an Omnis, you could have a +2 Devouring Orb on your helmet, and this would get you up to 20% increased duration, which means a lot because you get a bunch of extra orbs. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Devouring Orb. It's not that difficult. Then for Abyssal Echoes, I will suggest a +2 to Abyssal Echoes as it helps a lot, as I'll show you in a second. We take 2 points travel into Deep Expanse. Normally you want a lot more area on Abyssal Echoes, but we're actually fixing it with a cheap trick here. 1 point into Vorpal Explosion. It makes it so it no longer chains. The base Abyssal Echoes will chain and like hit everything on the screen, but it's very bad for single target, so that's why we're disabling that function. Then 1 point into Screaming Rifts, and then 2 points into Shrieking Echoes. What these do is it makes it so once I cast Abyssal Echoes, it keeps casting it, which means it keeps reapplying the Abyssal Decay, which means our Devouring Orbs can keep hitting and keep popping the Abyssal Decay, because like I said, it only stacks once, so you want to be able to hit fast, and you also want to be able to apply it fast to do all of your single target damage, which is why Abyssal Echoes does so much single target damage, because of this interaction. Then we take 2 points into the Spreading Chaos and Overwhelming Doom. This just makes it so when I place this on the ground, literally like a decent chunk of the screen gets Abyssal Echoed, which, thanks to the fact that Devouring Orb has a big orbit range while also, being able to shoot at range, means that we pretty much clear up stuff even if we miss it with the Abyssal Echo originally, which is really cool. This spread stuff is really strong, and one of the main reasons this works for Monolith. 1 point travel to Vorpal Reverberation. We get plenty of spell flat elsewhere. 2 points travel into Rippling Corrosion. 2 points travel into Tides of Rust because we don't care about the armor shred. 1 point into Time Compression. This makes it so it no longer has a cooldown, so we can spam it on single target like that. We technically don't really need that if we're just using it for clear, but obviously for single target, we need to be able to cast as many as possible. Then 5 points in Abyssal Dispersion, because this adds a bunch of mana costs on it, so this brings it back to a decent amount. You could run Void spell mana costs if you're having problems with mana, but I didn't really have problems with mana, especially thanks to Reversal, so I didn't really have a problem with that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for Abyssal Echoes. One thing, if you do have +2, I would heavily suggest obviously going into Turbulence. I do have +2. I believe, yep, I do. You want Turbulence because you want as much Abyssal Echo Decay duration, because it is a direct more damage multiplier to all of your damage, because you're taking that duration and turning it into instant damage every single time you hit a target. So you want as much duration as humanly possible. Reversal, stereotypical Reversal setup. Nothing really to talk about here, other than the fact the Void Rifts do actually help you pop the Abyssal Echo stuff, so you actually don't even need Devouring Orb in that regard, which I can show you. Like literally, bam, popped it, 40k ticks right there. That clears like most of the trash in the entire game. So you could even use Reversal to pop stuff, which is really cool. Anomaly, stereotypical Anomaly setup. This is like every single Anomaly built, like every single Void Knight. Get the attack and cast speed, get the cooldown recovery speed, make it so the bubble stays on you, get the bunch of leech. Like there's not really much different here. And of course, here's stereotypical Sigil setup. It's the same Sigil setup that every Void Knight uses, getting into Sigils of Despair, getting the Void damage, all that. Like it's it's literally every single Void Knight. It's like not really different. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the passives here. We take 8 points into Fearless. The vitality is really strong because we get 2 spell flat void per vitality. That is actually one thing I'm missing on gear. I'm only at 26 vitality. You should have like close to triple that if you properly invest into the build, which I haven't because I have a +2 to Abyssal Echoes, but I don't have the Vitality on the chest, and I don't have Vitality on the helmet instead. Vitality would be better than the Echo damage, by the way. So vitality is your best scaling stat because, like I said, it gives you 2 flat per vitality, and it also increases your max HP, which increases your tankiness. And since you have so much leech, you want as much HP as possible, and that's why Ravenous Voids are so insanely strong, which I'll talk about later. Then 5 points into Armor Clad. We're close to enemies all the time on single target because we want to be close to them so that Devouring Orb overlaps and hits enemies to pop them more often, which is why we're grabbing this. 5 points into Valiant Charge because we want the HP and, of course, the movement skill, cooldown, recovery speed. 6 points into Relentless with increased damage, obviously. 1 point into Gladiator. We are dual wielding. We are taking a Dragonhorn Wand and a Blade of the Forgotten Knight to get as much cast speed as humanly possible. And speaking of cast speed, we take 5 points in the Blade Master to make it so when we're holding a sword, we get a bunch of cast speed. Makes the build feel really fluid, and monoliths like makes up for the fact that you have to cast so many things. As you can tell, that is a lot of cast speed we lose, hence why I'm grabbing it. Then, of course, stereotypical setup in Paladin, 8 points in Defiance for the Res, 7 points in Valor for the HP, so we can get up to Sigils of Hope, so we can cast Sigils of Hope later on. Then 10 points into Abyssal Endurance. Obviously, this is a really strong node, gives you a lot of stuff for just 10 points. 6 points into Temporal Corruption for the Flat Void, because we still want as much Flat Void as humanly possible, because it's one of our scaling metrics. 6 points into World Eater. This Void damage leashes life, works on the dot, and that's the whole reason why this works. 8 points to the Void Bolts, like I said, as much flat as humanly possible. I don't grab this because it's not really worth it, especially since we're not running Smite. 5 points into Echoing Strikes, Echo Chance. You want as much Echo Chance as possible because this will mean more Devouring Orbs, and more Devouring Orbs equals good. 10 points into Time Legion, same thing here. And of course, 1 point to Avatar Regret, same thing here as well with the more Devouring Orbs. This pretty much reads 40% more Devouring Orbs, which is really strong for us when we're clearing. Then 10 points into Eternal Form for as much HP as possible. Then we fill out Dread for movement speed. Hey, look, it's my name, yada, yada, yada. Movement speed, increased damage, getting as much increased damage as humanly possible. And that's pretty much it for the skill tree. And for, well, passives. And for the gearing. Now, I am not running a Ravenous Void. Why am I not? Because I'm trying to showcase the build, what it looks like without a Ravenous Void, because I don't think everyone has a Ravenous Void. If you want to farm a Ravenous Void, what I did was I farmed the last rune, literally all last patch until it dropped. It is a 3% drop rate on Elder Gaspar, I think, at max like rarity, which means you just farm them a bunch of times, you'll eventually get your very own pair of Ravenous Voids. Why are these so strong? Well, not only do they give you vitality, so that's 20 Void flat already. You get 5 Void barriers, which is like, I think it's like, what is it again? I think it's 5% damage reduction. So you have 25% damage reduction, which is multiplicative with all your HP, right? Take less Void damage. You turn some of your physical into Void, which means that you take 9% less physical as well as Void, right? You get 10%, well, however much increased health, up to 15%. Wow, I didn't realize how bad my gloves were rolled. Huh, my gloves were rolled terribly. Are they? Yeah, they're rolled terribly. Well, I guess the less Void damage taken was rolled well. But yeah, the health and then the endurance. This means this almost, I think, doubles your EHP. So it may not look like it. It's like that 2,734, but we get the 25% reduction in damage as well, while also getting the reduction in Void and physical, which is why Ravenous Void is so insanely strong for this build, and why it's so insanely strong in general is because it is a lot of EHP for free. Obviously, if you don't have it, you don't need it. You could run just atrophies instead. I got a really sick pair of atrophies. It's one of the main reasons I want to play this build. The cast speed is really nice because being able to cast very fast. You don't need this. You could run a cast speed glove with like HP, Crit Avoid, yada, 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 like your normal fanfare. The pen is really nice though. We do have Shred, so this brings it up to like 61% total on bosses, which is nice. Then for the helmet here, We take, obviously, you want Vitality there instead, and Endurance. Omnis, you don't need an Omnis. Like I said, this is literally just like, you don't want this actually. You want an amulet with void damage and like, you want the cast speed base, you want void damage, void pen, resistance, or frailty, or HP. This isn't really good for us. The +1 to skills isn't that required. The resistances obviously are really nice, but we can cap our resistance elsewhere. The only reason I'm running it is because I wanted to cap my resistances easier without having to like go into my stash and craft more gear. The wand, void damage, damage over time, or spell damage works. All three of them work. You want a Dragonhorn wand because it has cast speed. You want as much cast speed as possible to make your build feel as fluid as possible. Cast speed prefix, of course. Then you want chill slow on the suffixes. Chest. This is almost your perfect chest. Needs to be on the crit avoid base, also, or it could be on the void damage base. Either one depends on which crit avoid you have. And of course, instead of that void damage and spell void damage, you want vitality instead, because like I said, vitality not only scales your damage, it also scales your HP at the same time. Offhand, I would say this is not required, but this is very quality of life. If you wanted to be tankier, you could throw on a shield, you could throw on a bastion, you could like throw on whatever else. The main reason I like this is because it enables this node at the top of the sentinel tree for the cast speed, which means we get a bunch of cast speed, like I said, and I can show you versus like having this instead. Like, it's so much better in terms of like monolith clearing. Like I said, though, if you feel squishy, you can always use your shield. There's nothing wrong with using a shield because you get plenty of flat from your vitality stacking, and like it's not necessary. It's just a nice quality of life kind of thing. And of course, rings, mana regen, void damage, spell damage, damage over time, resistance, or HP, endurance, crit avoid. You want movement speed rings because you want to be able to move through the monoliths fast, of course. The same thing on the other ring. My rings are absolute trash. Oh my god, they're so bad. Belt, cleanse, mana regen, HP. You don't want the crit avoid there, obviously. You want HP there. You can move crit avoid anywhere else. You can get dragon. I don't have dragon, stuff like that, right? Gloves, like I said, atrophy. You can run cast speed on these. This is a good legendary target because you can self farm this all the time. Or you like obviously get Ravenous Voids as well. You can be lucky, you know, yada yada yada. If you have Ravenous Voids, please use them. I'm not using them, like I said, because I know not everyone else has them, so there's no point in me using them if you guys can't use them, right? So I would suggest atrophies instead until you get them. Then boots, literally bests in slot boots like you possibly get. Like you know, I've been using these boots since like I dropped them like a patch and a half ago. Like, they're my pride and joy. If I ever get a +4 legendary potential like boots, I will be slapping these fuckers on them. Then of course, mana regen. You want mana regen because it makes it a lot more fluid in the monolith. You have plenty of increased damage through other means, so you don't need as much increased damage, and like you don't really need anything else. Probably cast speed here instead of the dexterity, obviously. Resistance, frailty, endurance, like whatever you need for that to make it so you don't have to run an omnis like I'm running. Obviously, there will be a finished build planner in the description that will be a lot better for you. I'm just going over everything, right? Idols, Abyssal Decay Duration. You want Abyssal Decay Duration. It is a more damage multiplier. This is your perfect idol. You want 4 of these fuckers. But yeah, this is like your perfect idol. You want 4 of these. Then you can either run Vitality idols. They were introduced recently. Show you. You could run Vitality idols with resistance, and that would help you cap your resistance while also scaling your damage, while also scaling, you know, your HP, right? Or you could run these if you feel you're good on HP or you have a Ravenous Void. You run void damage if a skill echoes, which is all the time, then increase void damage over time. This actually rolls really freaking high, so this has a really good ceiling for good damage over time, which is really nice. As you can tell, like, I'm not even running really good ones, and it's like an insane amount of increased damage, which is nice. So if you're lacking damage, this is definitely where to go. Yeah, with all that being said, that's the rest of the build. I hope you enjoyed. With all that being said, have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you're at, and bye.